Hello, this is Scott Jentz. Welcome to Sandbox Stories. Welcome to the Sandbox Story, which is an interview of Dr. Ken Lawenda. He's an industry veteran of hospital-based care, Optometric Association volunteerism, regulatory affairs, and so much more. Dr. Lawenda, I'm thrilled to have you on Sandbox Stories.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I really appreciate you entertaining having me on, and more than happy to spend whatever time we need today and try to see if I can probably provide not only you, but other people that may be listening to this some information, a little bit of history and everything. Thank you.
That's really what this is about. And so let's just start with this. You've resided and practiced all across the country, and currently you live in Montreal. Tell us about your wife, who's Canadian, and what you're doing in Montreal these days.
Okay, well, I moved from California to actually Vancouver, British Columbia, to be working up over there. I was in Los Angeles for about pretty close to 40 years, private practice in West Hollywood. And when I went up to Vancouver, British Columbia, I happened to have met my wife from there, and she lived actually in Montreal. She's an art teacher, retired art teacher. She grew up in New Brunswick. And the decision was for me to either have her come to Vancouver or possibly to California, or me coming back to the East Coast. I grew up in New York City, and I kind of missed the Four Seasons, and so for me it was kind of a natural progression. And so we're about an hour from the border, and my home is still the U.S. But Montreal is wonderful. I love it up here, and the people are wonderful, and the city is great. So unlike Los Angeles, with all the congestion and everything else that you have, it's a more comfortable, more relaxed place to live.
And obviously the pandemic era changed how everyone connects to their kids and grandkids, but you've got a bunch. Tell us about them.
Yeah, my son lives in Washington State. I have two kids. My son lives in Washington State. He's a radiation oncologist, and has been practicing there now for 3 years. My daughter lives, Karen, she lives in Los Angeles, and she's doing software sales and does that with real estate, and also it's quite good. The only problem is we're 3,000 miles away, and the pandemic, of course, has not made it very easy to travel. So we communicate by phone or by FaceTime or other means. So I can't wait for things to loosen up.
So let's get into you being a professional. You know, you were telling me leading up to this interview that one of the things you've done recently is taken several executive education courses. What's driven you to do that? Because you describe yourself as at a semi-retired point in your career. I'm really interested in what you've done there.
Well, I've been working with the Vermont State Board of Optometry. I've been working also with ARBO. I'm serving on a number of committees with ARBO, Judicial Council / Resolutions Committee. I'm also on their OE Tracker Committee, plus I'm planning on running this year for the ARBO Board of Directors. Having also served in California for 8 years, I was appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger and also in BC. I'm in a unique position where I can be able to look at the standard of care, protection of the public, and what's been happening with technology. There's been big advances, and what I've seen that we have to be very, very careful. We have to, as regulators, be able to see what's out there. We have to make sure that these technologies fit into a certain amount of, let's say, safety, clarity, and it's going to be helping patients. So what really prompted me to take the classes is one of them, of course, is leading basically digital change in healthcare. Another one is removing barriers to change. And one of the reasons for that is that to make any change, if there is going to be, and there's major changes going on. Just today, Microsoft wound up purchasing Nuance, which is involved with electronic health records. They're also involved with basically with Siri, making the job easier. All these type of things will make patients the time with the doctor is probably more efficient, getting all this information. But we're also looking at online technology and what's been happening in the profession. And what really also prompted me is to see what the difficulty has been. The change is very difficult. Status quo, of course, could be very, very easy. We've been practicing for years, and that's not to say that that's going to go away. But we have to find ways of adapting and utilizing technology in a safe manner. And that's the reason why I took these classes, one at Harvard Medical School and two at Wharton, to be able to see if there is change, how do we remove those barriers to change? What is necessary? What are the steps? And I do think as a regulator, it's important for regulators to be able to see this as well. So that's what prompted me.
I see it from the regulatory insights and leadership perspective. Is there a learning for the independent eye care practitioner about the importance of considering what I'd consider it to be a little bit of alternative education on the idea of executive leadership, for example, digital transformation? I think that seems applicable to the ECP in practice too, as they run their business.
Well, I think it's very, very important. I think technology, we have in our practices a variety of pieces of equipment, from OCTs, visual fields. Well, what's transpiring now? There are visual fields that you can do on iPads. There's basically with autorefraction, there are software programs that are out there. But again, there are a lot of areas where these technology classes, or let's say being introduced to new technology, how do you incorporate that into practice? The standard of care cannot go away. We have to be able to educate. We have to be able to inform. And for this reason, what is very, very important is that you have to have people, whether they be educators, whether they be regulators. You need to also have people in the insurance area, vision care insurance area, basically researchers, to be able to look at these technologies and to see how they fit in, because not all of them are going to fit in and not all are going to provide the standard of care. It's educating also our profession. And fortunately, actually back in 2009, I had a paper on ethically incorporating telehealth, telemedicine. And this is back prior to the pandemic, because I saw what was happening with a lot of these online companies, the for-profit companies that were trying to not only promote that, but they made the patients feel or the public feel that that was an exam. Well, that was one area. But again, I was very appreciative of the fact that the AOA decided that this was definitely a topic that was needed to be discussed. And then, in fact, they actually did a white paper more recently to update the 2017 on telehealth, telemedicine. And this month, the March-April AOA focus is keeping the medicine in telemedicine. So I think that the schools of optometry, I think it's important. I think the younger doctors that are out there probably are more adept to using technology than, let's say, a lot of senior doctors who may be comfortable to a point, but we're very, very much on our telephones. We're in with computers. We're on with iPads. And the ease of being able to handle this, I think, can easily be done. But I think we have to get everybody on board in a coordinated manner. And that's one of the reasons. But I definitely think that education is important. And I think our association will probably move in that direction as well. I know for a fact that a lot of politicians and legislators, it's being patient-driven. I think healthcare is going to be more patient-driven. We have to have access to care. We have to be available for our patients. If we're living in a rural area and doctors aren't that close to the doctor, how do you be able to get healthcare in that direction? So we're in an exciting time. We're at an inflection point. We either go in one direction or we go in another. But I'm very happy to see that these changes are going on, but they have to be done in a correct way.
That's a very deep summary. And I hope that before we're done today, I'm going to get back to that a little more deeply. I want to get to better understand you and what drives you. You said you grew up in New York, you grew up in the Bronx. You told me that your dad was a baker at the family bakery near Yankee Stadium.
Hmm.
What was it like growing up
Hmm.
there, and what did you learn from your family growing up?
Well, it's very, very interesting. Your appreciation for little things. We grew up in the Bronx in basically a six-story building. There was like maybe 50 families that lived in a building. You just immediately go outside, and there was friends out there, and parents were always available if parents worked, like both my parents worked. You always had family out there or friends, moms or dads or whatever. So it was a very communal type of situation. And it wasn't a type of an area where everybody's driving Mercedes and Cadillacs. So you get an appreciation for the things in life. And education for me was one of the things that I always wanted to pursue. And I was the first in my family to actually go to college and graduate and to go into optometry school. And so uh, there's a sense of fulfillment that, a lot of times people can go in big directions, whether it be law or other things. But I found that it was very, very good for me. And I really appreciate where I'm at, where I am in life right now for those things, because you can kind of reflect back.
And you ended up going over to UCLA for undergrad, and then you went to the Los Angeles College of Optometry, which was then on the USC campus as the predecessor for Southern California College of Optometry. You graduated in 1970, and I'm really interested in your perspective, sharing it with the audience about what education was like then and how you can juxtapose it to education today.
Well, our class was actually the first of the four-year curriculum. So prior to that, was a three-year curriculum to optometry school. And at that time, they just started. It just started basically working with technology, with like almost like the beginnings of auto refraction. I remember one of my term papers happened to be on fiber optics. And with fiber optics, again, that's one of the areas that was also quite new at that time. But we were starting at that time as well. The crux was primary care was starting to be more emphasized. At that time in California, the rules and regulations of therapeutics and TPAs, we weren't able to use therapeutics at that point. And, we called it the saline generation. You have some type of irritation to your eye, you put saline, and that was it. So in the beginning, we were probably at the forefront of, uh, of, of the beginning of where our profession is leading today. Education was very highly with pathology, of course, dispensing and things like contact lenses and all the subjects that we discussed. So it's probably not much different now, except I think we are really realizing that primary care is emphasized a lot more. And I think it was a little bit less. It wasn't, let's say, 80% of our curriculum. For us, it was probably 40 to 50%. So I think we're moving more into that higher degree of primary care education.
And you mentioned that you started a practice in California. You were in West Hollywood. You ran that practice for a long time. What was your practice like?
Well, it was a very unique practice. West Hollywood, if none of your listeners know, is a very, very vibrant community, very artsy community, a lot of directors, a lot of people in the entertainment business, a lot of pop, let's say, people in the music business. So what was very, very unique and very, very different from my office as opposed to a lot of other offices is people were coming in also not only for a very, very good examination, but they were also coming in for style. They were coming in for a unique product. And I happened to be fortunate because we had a lot of companies that surrounded my office that were new up and coming companies. I can mention LAI Works, which was also in West Hollywood. You had Oliver Peoples. You had at that time Optique Boutique. And these people catered to a lot of people. They were opticians, but they were transforming eyewear into something that was fashionable. which again used to be very utilitarian. You put on a pair of glasses, and it could be like a combination frame or something that was in plastic. It would be something you probably wouldn't want to wear, the old, compared to what they had now. So it was a very, very wonderful area to practice, and it gave me great opportunity to actually connect with a lot of these people who I'm still in contact with today. So it's great. Also in that area, we had a major hospital, still is there, of course, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and Cedars-Sinai is one of the top institutions, hospitals in Los Angeles, if not in the country. And we also had an eye care clinic where we had 26 volunteer doctors volunteering their time to people in need who so we provided eye examinations, and Jewish Family Services at the hospital paid for the glasses for people. So we're providing a service. So it was a very unique area. It was a very inclusive area. And unlike LA, which could be very spread out, it was almost with a community within a community.
And as part of your work with Cedars-Sinai, you actually had a relationship with them that was sort of formal in addition to your practice?
Well, my relationship with Cedars-Sinai, I was the clinical chief as well as chief of optometry at Cedars. I was on staff for 40 years. The program is still going on, and Steven Spielberg, they had a clinic over there, a building that was paid for by Steven Spielberg to provide outpatient care. So it was very, very great. It was wonderful to be able to do some volunteer work and giving back to the community. Maybe this is a little bit of my upbringing, because when you look at glasses and you look at everything else, a lot of times these services, there are a lot of people out there that could not, let's say, well afford. So it's giving back to the public, and that's another drive for me. It's another reason why I think I enjoy doing my volunteer work and the things that I'm doing right now.
Yeah, and it's not just lip service. You're a devoted optometric volunteer, and it's not for everyone, but I wonder, with what you've gotten out of it and what you've given through it, how you can, compel maybe the audience that has said, listen, I got enough things going on. I do a little volunteering at the elementary school, or I've served on the city council for a term, to do more volunteering, and particularly around the profession of optometry, because it really is gratifying, and you learn a lot out of it, don't you?
I find that my volunteer work with the association, as well as with the state boards of optometry, is extremely important. One of the things that I think a lot of people find is that they look at volunteers maybe for them as, well, somebody else can do it, and if we did that somebody else can do it type of situation, I don't think our profession, number one, would have moved in the direction that it has. When I served as president of the California Optometric Association, we were also at a point where we were increasing the scope of practice, and it's very, very difficult. And you have to have volunteers who can also connect and with the legislators, and people have to do that. This is not something that just kind of happens, that they say, oh yeah, well, optometrists need to be able to do this. So in an association in the advocacy area, I think it's extremely important to find that if we want to move the profession forward in a correct way, we have to be able to have volunteers that are willing to step up to the plate, just like you have done over the past. As I say, with myself, it's an ongoing situation. I'll continue to do that. And I think the AOA is very fortunate to have a lot of volunteers on a lot of different committees. They do good work. And when it comes to the regulatory boards, this is a different story, because you wear a different hat. You're not advocating for the profession, but you're out for the protection of the public. And it's actually a very good thing to have, because you have the background of where our profession is moving or heading, but you also need to realize that you're serving the public. You're appointed by the governors of the states, and it's a government position. And for me, especially for all the people that I've served with over the years, that's it. You have to kind of look at where we stand. Do we have the education? Do we have the ability? Are the doctors doing what they need to do? You want the public to have that assurance. And in other ways, what is very important with that is that it enables the public to see that people are out there for their protection. It's not self-serving. It's not something that's going to be protective of a profession, but it's a good weight and there's a good balance between those. And that's why I really enjoy the time. But I really enjoy having the public members because it's educating. I tell the public members on the boards, they're more important than actually the doctors on the boards because the public looks at public members and they can see themselves in there. And if they better understand and are educated, that's it. That's not, you feel like you've done a good job. And that's what we try to do.
It seems like the most misunderstood part of regulatory agencies is the doctor's misperception that they're there to grant their license and sort of be there for them. And you just stated it's about the public being protected. Is that the most misunderstood part of regulatory agencies, or is there more from your experience that a practicing optometrist should understand about what the regulatory agency does?
Well, when you look at the reasons for, let's say, the American Optometric Association, volunteerism, like we discussed, it's basically insurance, basically for your license. People, I think, have a view of regulators as kind of like the judge, if you will, and jury. And the problem is with that is that there are a lot of issues that are out there with regards to regulations that prevent people from doing certain things. We look at, let's say, we want to move the profession forward like we did with glaucoma, for example, in California. Well, we have to be able to sit up there as regulators to be able to discuss with, let's say, ophthalmology or physicians and surgeons what we do as a profession. They know what we do, but again, it's making sure that the public can basically understand what our education is doing. So in many ways, we're actually protecting the public in watching over what's happening. We're not going to immediately jump on and say, yes, that's important because we want to do this so we can capture more market share. That is less important to the regulators. If it's safe and efficacious and the patients are going to wind up, let's say, in a win-win situation, we look at education. We look at the courses that are being offered. We want to make sure that these courses are going to provide basically the doctors with the education to be able to perform services, save the number of hours. So really what we're doing is we are basically also judging doctors. If doctors are not doing the right thing, you can kind of look like the bad guy if you're sitting on a board and there's a person, let's say, who's in front of the board because of some type of problem that they've had with their license or something that they've done in an office. People have this fear and they're afraid to look at the state board. But really, I think state boards are very vital for the public. And I think it gives the assurances and the legislators, they look to the state boards for direction. They, again, will always want to increase scope of practice, but they're going to look at, is this going to be safe for the public? And so in other ways, that's where I think there's a benefit and why there's an importance. But we're human beings, we're the same people that anybody else is, and but you have to wear a different hat as a regulator, and that's sometimes difficult. And but it's very rewarding, and I wouldn't be doing it for since 2007, so it's a lot of years.
It is
13 years.
You expressed earlier your commitment to supporting AOA and volunteer activities around ethics and this ongoing expression of teleoptometry. And you mentioned the most recent AOA Focus article that is called Keeping the Medicine in Telemedicine. I'm curious if you can espouse the profession's key to successful use of teleoptometric service providers.
Well, if we look at and the name of the article, Keeping the Medicine in Telemedicine, there's lots of views, like we discussed a little bit earlier, with regards to the fact that when we're keeping the medicine, it's trying to incorporate technology. We're looking at the facts of these unique devices, whether it be handheld devices, whether it be lenses or visual fields, things that are going to be accessible and maybe more patient-friendly. And we as optometrists, we look at this in a maybe slightly different eye, because people, I think, look at technology as possibly taking away patients from their office, that they're going to be winding up going online and getting glasses and contacts. And so there's an immediate red flag that is put up in front of doctors' minds for the acceptance of telemedicine. Now, again, if you look at the fact of where the medicine is and where the article is really trying to go, is that we have to be looking at, be open to change, but be open to also incorporating change if it's going to be safe and efficacious. If, for example, if we're looking at a technology that is, they say is an examination, when it's really not an exam, all it is maybe like a quick auto refraction on a cell phone. Is that an eye examination? Well, that's not the medicine part. The medicine part really is going to be the relationship that doctors have. And that's basically what the article is trying to get at, is that the standard of care has always been a doctor-patient relationship. And if the doctor is taken out of the equation, and you look at technology itself and just whatever the advantages of technology is for a patient, for example, who needs to get eyeglasses and doesn't, for example, see the doctor, there may be a lot of conditions that may go undiagnosed. For example, and I'm going to use this as an example, when I was practicing up in British Columbia and sitting on the board up over there, technology basically that was coming in Canada was actually affecting the rules and regulations. In fact, what became an important factor is that the profession became deregulated. In other words, you don't need to have a doctor do an exam. You can just have a sight tester press a button, and that would be the exam. And literally, you could have problems of undiagnosed diabetes or diabetic retinopathy. You could have issues with glaucoma. So we want to keep the medicine in. Now, and the article is explaining, and we had different contributors to the article. And I think what it's basically saying, if we keep the medicine in, the doctor-patient relationship involved in that equation, and being able to find out what that proper mix is going to be. And I think that there is a proper mix, and if it's done correctly, it could be very advantageous. Because if we don't do this, if we aren't engaged, I can almost guarantee and tell the viewers out there that what we're probably going to be looking at is there are huge technology companies that are out there, whether they be Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, that are out there, that are looking at data sets and things and how they can best make this transformation of healthcare more efficient. And the thing is that we have to be part sitting at the table. And that's where I think optometry needs to be. And I think that optometry and ophthalmology need to look and coordinate and try to find ways that this technology is not such a viewed in such a negative manner, but used in a very, very positive manner.
I'm glad you pointed out that perceived negativity is the doctor gets eliminated. And that's why where every optometrist is going to start to express their concern. I envision a day where there may be a way for a practice to expand its delivery, but in many instances, while being the center point of the delivery system, the patient not being seen in the clinic for maybe a prolonged period of time. I don't know exactly how that happens, but I would hope that our colleagues would look at it as an opportunity to see the many patients that can't get into their doorway. Could you envision a day where a patient is seen much less frequently in person, but the optometrist is still the center point of delivering the care?
Can you go over that again with regards to the fact of with the doctor?
Yeah, let's say that technology is available. The doctor expresses with a patient where the patient is not actually in the clinic for a couple of years, but they fulfill essentially a complete eye examination through use of technology that's available to them through their computer or iPad at their home, but the doctor's still in control and the doctor's writing the prescriptions and managing the patient. Is there a day where an optometrist could actually manage a patient where they see them in the clinic less often and do so ethically?
I think that the laws and the regulations are probably going to, if they did do something along that type of line, I think there are certain conditions that maybe, let's say, contact lens wearers, being able to see fitting of contact lenses, refractions, these type of things. But when it comes to technology and there are major advances. There are units, for example, that people can be able to measure their pressures at home. There, as I mentioned earlier, also iPad software where people can be able to do their visual fields. And there's also other pieces of equipment that are out there where basically retinal photos can be done. So I do envision a time that probably will occur. And I do think that maybe within the next 5 to 10 years, is it going to be as good as an in-person examination? I don't think so. But I do think that there are ways that we can be able to have the patient seen and being under the doctor's care, being able to at least have like this conversation that we're having, if there was an eye irritation or so. There's a lot more that you can see in person that you can't necessarily be able to accomplish on a Zoom or a photograph or so. But I do think that technology is moving in such a direction that what may transpire is that I think healthcare is definitely going to change. I think the CMS is moving in a direction in such where they want to be able to get more care to people. And if we're only seeing 30% of the population, and there's another 70% of the population that's out there that doesn't know or even have ever had an examination by an optometrist, that's an area that truly concerns me. And I think that if we look at technology as an advantageous way of somehow finding out, seeing the public that is not getting their eyes examined, and having them seen by an optometrist or an ophthalmologist or whatever, but screening type of devices that may be out there that, again, may be helpful, but not as complete examinations. But I think as a referral source, I think that's probably where we're going to be headed, because we need a healthier population. And with the prevalence of diabetes and all these conditions and people living longer and in situations with AMD, it's invariably that they're going to be needing eye care services. And I do think something will move in that direction. But I think it's going to be a gradual, it won't be a slug. I think things are going to move along a little bit faster. But it's definitely something that there'll be needing to be expertise.
Yeah, you've looked at
this. If we don't do it,
yeah, you've looked at this for a long time, and your point is we've got to have groups, and you've been part of those that look at these emerging questions, so we can think about the hypotheticals. And I'm appreciative of you grabbing the hypothetical. The sense I take is that even in a regulatory approach, there is effort being made to look at how are these kind of technologies applied in an ethical and doctor-centered way. And ultimately, what resonated with me was your comment about seeing more patients that haven't been seen. The danger is those that want to take advantage of them from a very consumer-based point of view and sidestep the doc. And that's where doctors are fearful for losing patients or losing control. I suppose that in this consumer expansion of healthcare, optometrists and regulators are going to have to be very careful about where that line is.
Yes, absolutely. The people that are out there that are looking at what they classify as an examination so they can get prescription glasses, that they have to be knowledgeable. And I think this is where the association, it's very important, is to educate the consumers with, whether it be in magazines. that's one of the reasons why I've been serving, and I'm very happy to be serving on the Communications Division, the Content Review Board of the American Optometric Association, because we provide content to people, whether they're looking online, looking at basically Google or other type of means to be able to get information, but to better inform the public of what optometrists do, what the difference is between ophthalmology and optometry, and what is a complete examination. There's a lot of resources out there that people can go to. So I think our association does a good job. Can they do more? Of course. But even during the Olympics, there's going to be spokespeople that are going to be working on behalf of informing the public on what's transpiring and where we're basically helping out. So I do think that it is a very slippery slope, and you have to educate the consumers, and this is where the regulators have to be concerned. When they look at telehealth or they look at telemedicine, they don't just look at this as a convenience and it's a savings for the patient, but is this going to be protective of the patient? Are we doing a service by saying that this technology is okay when in fact it may not be? But you might be able to say, this can be done if it's done in this particular type of way. So we're out there we're looking at all of those factors, and I can understand where the practicing optometrist is, and they're looking at people going online, and if we really want to look at this, there's always going to be glasses being dispensed and contact lenses being dispensed. But again, my view, and this is my view, is that there are very successful practices that will maintain and still do what we've been doing for long periods of time. I see the movement really exponentially moving into primary care. So I think that I sometimes say that the ship may have sailed if people are going to be looking at maintaining practices and profit is only going to be dependent upon selling of eyeglasses or contact lenses. That's why these other companies may be wanting to get in there. They want to sell product. They want to be able to capture the consumer. But that might be where that slippery slope is. The consumer may be basically not being seen properly. But those people may not have been seen properly because they may be part of that 70%. So we've got to be able to look at how we capture that. And that's where I think this education is going to be coming in. I'm excited about the future. I mean, I think optometry is a great profession. I think that where we're headed is definitely at a point where this inflection point that I mentioned, we're either going to go in one direction or we're going to go in the other. And I think we're tending toward going in the correct direction. And I think we are going to be inclusive and a little bit more open to that change.
Well, one more thing about you personally. You do a lot of social media and you are a photographer. And from time to time, you've put out some really compelling images that you've taken. Tell us about your social media activity and your photography.
Well, what I've been doing, I would say, for the last 4 or 5 years is on LinkedIn, for example. I have right now pretty close to almost 30,000 eye care professionals in the US as well as worldwide that I connect with. And what I've been doing is I have many sources of information that comes to me on a daily basis that are all eye care related. And for that reason, I think it's kind of a good resource. AOA does their resource. I know that there's other, mine isn't one that's a social, like a Facebook page type thing, but it's more information to articles, and whether it be talking about telemedicine, whether it be talking about education. And that's another area that I'm also very, very involved in is as we're moving forward, to be able to provide information about where education is available. So I'm being able to be another resource that's out there. And to me, that has been very, very satisfying because you can wind up linking in with a lot of people, and it's a very, very good resource. And on Facebook, when you combine all of those, it can be up to almost 35,000 social media followers specifically. So I take a lot of joy in doing that. It does take a lot of time, but that's one of the things when you're semi-retired, you do have that time. With my photography, I actually didn't get into photography until much later. In fact, until I moved here. And what I found is that what I've really enjoyed doing the most is I love doing landscape photography. I love doing architectural photography and taking a picture of a building. But where I have always been fascinated, I've always liked abstract art. And from my first days of going to modern art museums and looking at Kandinsky's or Moreau, or you look at basically Picasso and all of these things, I'm thinking that to me is very, very interesting. But how can I do something with my photography? So what I've done over the years is, fortunately, with digital applications on my iPad or actually on my iPhone, but mostly with my iPad, I take a picture and I can break down that picture and digitally create an image that is unlike what you're actually seeing. It could be a picture of, let's say, LA's Disney Hall, but comes out looking something completely different, like a shell of something. And to me, I find that really rewarding, at least for me. I enjoy doing it. And the thing is that it gives me another means of expression of taking things and kind of deconstructing it and then trying to construct it into something different. And maybe that's a part of what I've been all my life trying to do, is kind of look at things that are out there and maybe deconstructing and reconstructing. And maybe it's the part of that relevance that, you think about, why do you do volunteer stuff? Well, maybe that's a little bit of it. You want to be able, because a lot of times, and I think that this is important for your viewers, is that I think what's most important as a volunteer, or as any person doing anything, there's always going to be people that are going to like what you're doing, and there's going to be people that look at, I don't think that that's a great thing or whatever. So you're going to have positive and negative input. But I have found that, if you think you're moving in the right direction and you are satisfied that that may be the area, your distractors may be out there, or people that are going to be opposed. But it's a matter of being able to talk to people reasonably, be able to move them. Because I know the status quo, as we talked about in the beginning, it's so easy. The status quo is so easy because we've been doing it day after day after day. But we've done a lot since this pandemic. What have we done? And it's, fortunately for the government, they look at CMS reimbursements. We look at telehealth, telemedicine, which, again, was not very utilized before, but we still had to see patients. So things are rapidly changed. So it's like things that happen in life that we have no control over change inevitably other things. And it's kind of like rapid advancement. And so I think that in many ways, the sadness of the pandemic and the loss of lives and everything else, and a lot of doctors not being able to get back to practicing the way that they would like to be practicing, I think has done something. And maybe that's the breaking up and kind of moving on and recreating. And so I think, just like a lot of people, it's something, if you feel you're moving in that right direction, but you have to try to bring people along in a proper way. But I want optometrists to know that optometry is a great profession, will always be. We're moving in that right direction. And if we can leave a message that, to me, I think will resonate, is that if we look at where we are and where we're going and where we're headed, there's a lot of great opportunity out there, and you just need to get involved. I know Scott and I, we've been involved over the years, and we need to be able to encourage people out there, and we need to be inclusive of who the doctors are out there. That includes doctors that are in private practice, hospital-based practices, employed ODs, whether they be, they're all part of the family, and we have to be able to encourage this. So it's, I think when we get the family together, we're a very, very strong entity, and I think that we can move the profession along in a very, very effective way. So,
well, Dr. Ken Lawenda, this has been a great conversation, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your positive, constructive, and inspiring stories. Thanks for giving us so much to think about.
Well, thank you for having me, Scott. I really appreciate that, and I can't wait to see you at our next meetings.
I hope we see each other soon. And to the audience, as always, thank you for attending and paying attention to Dr. Lawenda's incredible stories. Until my next Sandbox story, be great at all you do.